All right, today we're going to do completing the square part 2. You have already learned how to complete the square. You did that in the first part of this section, and that was how you took the middle term, you divided it in half, and then you squared it and you added it to the end. This is exactly the same idea. However, you have to remember that rule that says what you do to one side of the equation, you have to do to the other side. So that rule comes into play. So let's take a look here. Solve x squared minus 12x plus 4 equals 0. So what you're going to do, and you're going to solve by completing the square. So the first thing you do, obviously, is you're going to write out the first equation. All right, now this is where things change just a little bit. You are going to move the c term to the other side of the equal sign. What you have to have is this single term right here that doesn't have a variable attached to it needs to be moved over to the other side. If there is a number on the other side, you just combine it. So we would actually subtract 4 here. Now, when I rewrite this, I actually do this. I go minus 12x, and then I put a little line like that to remind myself, and then minus 4, and I put a line there. Because remember, what you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. Now you're going to complete the square just like you did in the first part of this. You're going to bring down b, which is negative 12. You're going to divide it by 2, which is negative 6. Then you're going to square it, which is positive 36. And then you're going to add it here, but you're also going to add it here. So positive 36 here, because what you do to one side, you do to the other. Now, what you just did right here was you created a perfect square. Now, in the last video, I said this little number right here is going to help you. Because when you divide b by 2, that's going to give you what this will factor to. So x squared minus 12x plus 3 will factor to x minus 6. That's where the minus 6 comes into play. Squared equals negative 4 plus 36, which gives you 32. I'm already wanting to say square root. Now, the left side has a square on it, and that square is on the entire parentheses. You're able to just square root this. So now what you're going to have is you're going to have x minus 6 equals the square root of 32. Well, in the beginning of this chapter, we learned how to simplify a radical. And this radical will break down, when you are done, it will actually break down to plus or minus 4 square roots of 2. So you have x minus 6 equals plus or minus 4 square roots of 2. But remember, your ultimate goal here is to solve for x. So we are going to add 6 to both sides. Now, this 6 cannot combine with the 4 radical 2 because it is not the same thing. So you have x equals 6 plus or minus 4 square roots of 2. And that's going to be your final answer right there. Right? So again, move your c term if it isn't already over there. Bring down the middle term, divide it by 2, square it, add it to both sides. This makes a perfect square trinomial. Then you're going to go ahead and square root both sides, etc., etc., etc. All right, let's move down to b. Now, one thing you'll notice about b is the c term is already moved over to the right side of the equal sign. So when I would do this, I would actually just go ahead and go x squared plus 8x, and then I would put those little lines in there. That line is just my thing to remind me I have to write something there. So at this point, you're going to bring down your b. You're going to divide it by 2, which is going to give you 4. And then you're going to square it, which gives you 16. So you're going to add that to both sides. Now you have x squared plus 8x plus 16, which is a perfect square trinomial, and factors to x plus 4. How do I know that? Because it's plus 4 right there. Squared equals negative 1 plus 16, which is 15. I'm going to square root both sides. And you're going to get x plus 4 equals the square root of 15. Well, 15 is only 5 and 3, so there is no pair, so 15 can't be broken down. So you would subtract 4 from each side. And remember, those two can't combine, so you're going to get x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 15. That's your final answer. All right, one more like that. There's a c term here, x squared plus 6x minus 3 equals 0 side. We need to move it to the other side by adding 3. So now we have x squared plus 6x. I'm going to put my little line to remind myself what I have to do. All right, now I'm going to bring down my b. I'm going to divide it by 2, which gives me 3. If I know this is going to factor to x plus 3 squared, that's what should happen. Square it. Plus 9 here and plus 9 here, so it's going to give me equals 12. By doing all of this, I've just made a perfect square trinomial, and luckily they've helped you out knowing that that's what's going to be when you factor it. Now you're going to square root both sides. X plus 3 equals the square root of 12. The square root of 12 can be simplified, and it can actually be simplified down to 2 square roots of 3. So x plus 3 equals 2 square roots of 3. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and my final answer is going to be x, move this over, x equals negative 3 plus or minus 2 square roots of 3. And that's the final answer there. Okay. All right. So those 3 problems I just did were when the a term in the front is just a 1. So this was 1x squared. This was 1x squared. This was 1x squared. The next example we're going to go to is when a does not equal 1. So in this case, a equals 2. Well, the good news is not really difficult. And I put that in a little thing over here. It just says, just one more step. Divide everything by the coefficient of x squared. So in other words, before you start, you're just going to go ahead and you're going to divide everything by the lead coefficient, or the coefficient of the x squared term. In this case, it's 2. So what's going to happen is you're now going to have x squared plus 4x plus 7 equals 0. Now, you're going to move your c, so you're going to have x squared plus 4x equals negative 7, and there's my lines. Bring down your 4. Divide it by 2, square it, add it to both sides. You now have a perfect square trinomial that will be x plus 2 squared equals negative 3. Square root both sides. You're now going to have x plus 2 equals the square root of negative 3. And we learned in section 1.6 about an imaginary number. So what we want to do is we want to take that negative out by making it an I on the outside of the radical. So now we have I square roots of 3. 3 can't be broken down, so I square roots of 3 is the same thing as the square root of negative 3. Subtract 2 and subtract 2. And the final solution here is going to be x equals negative 2 plus or minus I square roots of 3. And that's your answer. All right. Okay, flip the page. We'll go on to letter E. Same idea. This one has a lead coefficient of 3, so you are going to divide everything by 3 to begin with. You're going to divide this side by 3 and this side by 3, and that resulting answer is going to x squared plus 4x minus 6 equals 0. You're going to move your c to the other side by addition, so now you have x squared plus 4x equals 6. Complete the square. Bring down the 4. Divide it by 2, which equals 2. You're going to square that, which is 4, and add that to both sides. We now have a perfect square trinomial that breaks down to x plus 2. Remember, that's what gives you your factoring. Squared equals 10. Square root both sides. X plus 2 equals the square root of 10. The square root of 10 is basically 2 times 5, so it will not simplify. So you're just going to subtract 2 from both sides. Remember, there's a plus or minus here in the front. So the final solution is going to be x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 10. And that's going to be your final answer. All right. Now go to F. F looks a little bit different. This one requires you to distribute. Remember, you need an x squared term. You need a single x term. So what you want to go ahead and do is you want to distribute this through. And you're going to get 6x squared, because remember x times x is x squared, plus 48x equals 12. All right, 2 things we're going to notice here. The c is already moved to the other side, so we're good there. However, we have a lead coefficient of 6. So what you're going to do is you're going to divide everything by 6. So your new equation is going to be x squared plus 8x. Remember, we're going to complete the square, so there's my little line. 12 divided by 6 is 2, and then add that there. Bring down your middle term, 8, divided by 2, which is 4. Square that, which is 16, so positive 16 here and a positive 16 here. We now have a perfect square trinomial here, which will factor to x plus 4, all squared, equals 18. Square root both sides. You now have x plus 4 equals the square root of 18. Now you have to decide what 18 breaks down. Well, 18 breaks down to 2 and 9, 3 and 3. So you have a pair of 3's when it comes out of the radical. It only counts as 1, so x plus 4 equals 3 on the square root of 2. You need to subtract 4 from both sides. Those will not combine because a radical 2 cannot combine with something that's not a radical. X equals negative 4 plus or minus 3 square roots of 2. And that's your final answer. All right. What I want you to do now is I want you to go on to the your turns. Okay, and on the your turns, what you're going to need to do is work those out. When you get done, go ahead and hit play again. I'm going to change my papers out because I've already done them, and that way I don't have to keep explaining them to you and do them again. So I'm going to change my papers out. So go ahead and hit pause. When you come back, it's going to look a little different than it does now. All right, for number 1 on the your turn, you wanted to move your 4 to the other side, so there's your negative 4. So you had x squared plus 6x equals negative 4. You're going to bring down your 6, divided by 2, which is 3, square it, which is 9, add it to both sides. That made a perfect square trinomial of x plus 3 all squared here, equals 5. Square root both sides, so x plus 3 equals the square root of 5. The square root of 5 cannot be simplified, so you're going to go ahead and leave that alone. So then you would just subtract your 3, so you have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 5. Okay. Okay, go ahead and do number 2. Hit play when you're ready. All right, let's take a look at number 2. Okay, with this one, you needed to move your c over. So you squared plus 10x equals negative 8. Okay, you're going to bring down a negative 10. You're going to divide that by 2. Now, you have to be careful here because when negative 10 is divided by 2, it results in a negative 5. So when you factor it, you have to make sure you put minus 5. However, when you square it, it becomes positive. Remember, one of the characteristics of a perfect square trinomial is this is always plus. So you're going to add 25 to both sides, resulting in x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals negative 8 plus 25. Perfect square trinomial, x minus 5 all squared equals 17. Square root both sides. You're going to get x minus 5 equals the square root of 17. 17 is prime and cannot be broken down. So you're just going to add your 5 to both sides, and you're going to get 5 plus or minus the square root of 17. All right, move on to number 3. And when you're done, hit play. All right, here's number 3. This is the first. Hold on, rearrange the papers. Okay. This is the first one you're going to deal with that has a coefficient. The coefficient is 2. So go ahead and divide everything in the problem by 2. And when you do that, you'll end up with x squared minus 2x minus 7 equals 0. Add your 7 to both sides so that you now have x squared minus 2x equals 7. Bring down the negative 2, divide it by 2, which results in negative 1, and when you square it, results in a positive 1. Perfect square trinomial becomes x minus 1 all squared equals the square root of 8. Square root both sides. That gives you x minus 1 equals the square root of 8. The square root of 8 can be simplified to 2 square roots on 2. And remember, there's a plus or a minus in front of this. Then you're going to add 1, so that's going to be 1 plus or minus 2 square roots of 2. All right, well, if that's the third problem you've done and the third one you've gotten right, you're on a roll. That's really good. All right, hit pause, do the last one, and I'll go over it when you're ready. All right, here's number 1 that you had to distribute first. So what you wanted to do here was you went ahead and distributed the 4p through the parentheses, and you ended up with 4p squared minus 8p equals 100. Now, what you'll notice here, c is already moved to the other. So when you divided everything by 4 to get rid of that lead coefficient, you now had p squared minus 2p equals 25. Bring down the negative 2. Divide it by 2, which is negative 1. Square negative 1, which becomes a positive 1. You now have a perfect square trinomial, which factors 2p minus 1 all squared equals 26. Square root both sides. P minus 1 equals the square root of 26. The only way to get 26 is 2 and 13. So it can't be broken down. So now I'm just going to add 1 to both sides. So now you have P equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 26. And that's your final answer. All right, be sure if there's any questions that you might have that you jot them in the margins of your notes, so that way I can help you when you guys return to class. All right, have a good day.